Hello friends, I'm Colonel Failure and this is Transport Fever on a brand new map. This is a map that I've had specifically made for this series that should show off quite a few of the different mods that are available for Transport Fever. The series is called the Metropolis Mod Spotlight, and in each episode we're going to be adding new mods to the build, and we'll go through them all to make you aware of exactly what they can do. Some of these I will have used before, so if you've subscribed to a previous collection, there's a high chance you've seen some of these mods in action. But I wanted to make sure that every one of them got a reasonable amount of airtime so that we could actually see what it does in full effect. Now, as you can see, the landscape, she is brown, and that is because we are using a North American kind of setup for things, but we will be using trains from around the world, and hopefully as the map develops we will move we'll name certain cities after different cities, different areas of the world, and we'll specialize each city towards a particular regional area. So as we add trains and trams and buses and trucks and what have you, we'll make sure that they are culturally appropriate to the town that they're going to operate out of. Now, I've called it the Metropolis series because, we're aiming to build a relatively good-looking metropolitan area as a result of this. No more just bash it in and make some cash. This time around, we're going to bash it in and make more cash while making it look good, hopefully, at the same time. Mountains, we've got some. They're going to be less of a factor in this series than in the Alps, quite obviously. But I think they frame the area quite nicely, and therefore they're a valuable addition to the series. Right then, let's take a quick look around the map as a whole to get a feel for it before we kick off. The map has the name Twin Rivers for reasons that should be immediately obvious. And right now all the towns have US town names, although we'll change some of those up as we go and we theme them around different countries. But it's got a bit of everything. It's only a medium-sized map, so it's not going to be the biggest in terms of distance travelled, but it should be quite impressive once we've got as many vehicles running as possible. And this was an idea that I formed after having the later stages of the Alps series, where I could really start to develop some properly impressive looking lines and routes and complexity, and adding a great deal of traffic onto things. Simply the game couldn't cope with all the vehicles I wanted to sling down the thing. So a smaller map this time round, and hopefully that will add to greater traffic density, which should be quite the spectacle. Anyway, I have already picked out my starting point. We're going to start with El Paso here, and build up an El Paso, Detroit, Gilbert, Sioux Falls, Springfield kind of a hub. Now that's not gonna take off immediately. Obviously, we'll do a little bit at a time, but that's where we're going to kick off. And actually, this brings to mind the first mod that we're playing with, which is largely indispensable if you like a long playthrough. Should come as no surprise to anybody at all that the first mod I recommend is the time progression 4 times slower mod, which was created by RWBFX_UK. Catchy name, great mod. And basically all that does is it slows the game down by a factor of a quarter. Means that each month takes 4 times as long to progress, but equally important is that it means that every train, every service you run, earns a quarter of the amount. Now this means that you can be left hanging around for quite some time waiting to earn some cash to build your next startling project. But I have offset that with the second mod that we will be using in this series, which is the Pork Barrel mod, which was created by Erst O or Erst Zero. Your pronunciation may differ. And what this allows you to do is with each one of these, we'll find a nice out-of-the-way location for it. I think barrels live relatively close to a refinery, don't they? Oh, yeah, I should think so. Every time you buy one, you gain 500 grand. Now, I'm doing this to avoid using the no costs mod because I don't like the no costs mod. No costs is great for tinkering around, but with no challenge involved, what's the point to it? And the benefit you get from the pork barrel, as you can see, my cash is rattling up at a rather likeable speed here, is that firstly you have a record of just how much cash you've taken without authorization, and secondly, it means that you still have to make a profitable network unless you want to gradually fill your entire map with pork barrels. Right, 17 million quid. That should be enough to get me rolling, I would have thought. But I'm gonna keep my barrel collection over there, and we'll drop in on a regular basis to see how bad the situation has got. Obviously, you can just bulldoze them at a cost of a tenner a go, but we don't want to do that. Anyway, the pork barrel mod is a good one if you still want to build something that is going to pay for itself, while not having to sit around for ages waiting to have the cash to do so. And you know, that's not a terrible situation to be in. Right, we're going to start off in Sioux Falls. Now, for the first couple of towns, we're actually going to remodel them, which is why I've invested quite heavily in pork barrels to get myself going. Now, the centre of town is always where the town name sits. So if you want maximum growth in all directions, then being where the town name is not a bad place to be. You can't delete the entire cityscape. Doing so means that, well, that town's gone. You've erased it from history and the world. So you know, you want to be you want a little bit of genteel behaviour when removing a whole bunch of stuff from town. And as you can see, we've already spent 11 million quid on removing that, and we end up with this tiny little street here. But this is where we're going to start our first station. Now, the first station is quite important because it's going to be a terminal, and I want to avoid terminals as much as possible. The reason for this is that I want to avoid turning trains round as much as I possibly can, because we're going to instead employ loops, so that a train rarely, if ever, turns itself around. Now, that will become more important when we start doing goods work, but we will detail up all of the good stuff that we do to make that look as polished as possible. So terminals are going to be used very sparingly. Where possible, I will link each city to further surrounding cities. But we're going to smooth out this area as much as possible to begin with. Let's fling the contours on to see how we've done there. Not bad at all, actually. If we can remove this as well. I mean, arguably this is overkill because I probably won't reach this area, but you know, we'll do it anyway. Go on, smooth it out. Smooth it out. I should be focusing on the outside to keep it smoothing. So let's get in close and see how we're actually doing here. We're actually accomplishing precious little, and yet continuing to cost us money. All right, well, never mind. That's going to be more than enough, isn't it? Right, so if we think about where we're going to head to, every platform I want to have as a different terminus. We don't want empty platforms. That's a rule that I carried forward from previous recordings, from previous series, and we're going to keep that up now. So ideally, as the town grows, there will be enough between Sioux Falls and El Paso to form a proper commuter route, with multiple stop-offs along the way. I'm going to try and engineer it so that happens, and I'll give you a quick idea of what that's going to look like. But we're going to go with 8 platforms. Think big, or don't think at all. Both of these work. Anyway, we'll fling this around so we're broadly pointing in the direction we want. Now, the ideal here is that this marries up perfectly against this bit of road which it seems almost it does. Let's zoom in a little further, because there's going to be, if there's a gap, it's not straight, right? So that's about as close as you're going to get, and there's a tiny little bit of a gap there, but I can't twizzle it any more precisely than that. Now we want the end of the terminal to be fairly close to the town centre to really maximise the use that we get out of it, and that looks quite promising there. There we go, first station. That's not so bad. And that should leave us enough space for additional housing to be built along this side of the track. Now on the other side of the track, we're going to fling in some additional tracks here, because this will form a siding over time, but it's also where I'm going to stick the depot. And that would I mean, I'm not going to go for some kind of harebrained one depot to rule them all plan here. We're going to go for as many depots as we need, but we're not just gonna park them in without due care and attention. Instead, we'll park them in with a modicum of care and attention. That's modicum there. Remind me of this if I ever reach the stage of not using any care and attention when placing new depots. So we'll just bash this in here, and we're not going to worry too much about high levels of detail to begin with, but we will definitely get there over time. So if we park up about here, thank you, and we'll see how that matches up against the tracks, because I might want to tweak that in order to make it a little bit nicer. All right, let's have all of these match up with the edge of the station, and we'll park some redundant vehicles in there later on. I always meant to do this when building out the cargo hub in the last series, but it never really, well, when I say never really, what you mean to say is it didn't happen, never occurred. Right, how is that? A slight kink in proceeding, so I think I will move the depot, unless we don't care too much. If we do that, which is perfectly married up against the one next to it. Let's have a look. How much of a kink in proceedings are we talking about here? A small but noticeable kink is the proceeding all kink we've got. So let's confirm the destruction on that fella, and we'll have another crack at it. Because obviously, you know, money is no object in terms of building anyway. The goal is always going to be to make sure that what we build can run its own P&L, so it can cover its own costs. If we take this further, we'll get a better read on whether we're doing it straight. That feels straight-esque. Also, it also feels that we've built a lump in the ground here. That's not what we want this early on. You know, de-lump yourself. Come on. Reduce it down. Get it done. Peachy keen. Right, let's bang that depot. Hello there. Let's bang the depot back in again, and that should look a little bit more tidy. What do you know? It looks a little bit more tidy. All right, grand. So next up is to actually lay in some road network that is going to work over time. Now, given that this is the first section of town, what I'm after here is relatively broad strips of road. Now, getting these straight is slightly more of a mission. It's not impossible, and there are tools out there that will help with that, and that in itself doesn't look perfect. We'll settle for, you know, close enough on a regular basis, but we're going to try and get it right early on. Now, this little strip of brown we've got there we'll be able to replace later on when roads modernise some more. But we'll also stick in a bus/tram station here for future expansion, which isn't going to want to sit there. We'll sit it out here up against the edge of the track. There you go. That looks pretty respectable. And then we'll continue with this scheme around the idea. And then once we've got builds on our new pieces of track, we'll then work back and delete the original part of town and bring it up to speed with the rest of the get-up. Yeah, there is no escape. The bulldozer cometh for every town, and don't for a moment feel like you're gonna escape from that particular horror. Right, let's if we continue this, see, we're not quite there because you can't run over that. So we still need to go a little further with our number of sidings here. Right, and we're just going to run a load of them, and then I'll probably delete a few back again when we get up to the detailing part, in order to make it look a little bit less Track City. Now then, how do we feel about that? Well, we don't feel anything just yet. Let's run the street down the side here. Actually, let's continue running the road out of the end of that one. And we're going to eyeball it because you know, that's how we roll. That looks relatively straight. There we go. So good length boulevards, I think, is the way to describe it in terms of how these roads are going to lay out. And then I'll let the AI build. We're not going to restrict the AI's fun any more than we have to. There we go. Keep going along there like that. That looks pretty handsome. And then that seems to be wanting to snap into a straight. It's not quite straight though, is it, friend? That's you're just there. You go. That, however, is definitely Romanesque in its straightness. We'll do the medium street connection on there, like so. And again, when we come back and look at this, we'll polish up with some actual tarmac on there, some asphalt. Now, will you run along there happily? You will not. Will you run along here happily? I'd love to get a double road in there, but it is not to be. Oh, it's a shame. I've laid that out quite pleasantly, and we're not getting the goods out of it. As much as it's a passenger station, and therefore goods are not exactly what we're after. All right, well, you're gonna have to come up with some kind of scheme, some kind of notion to get through there. Can we not level crossing across that in the slightest? We cannot. All right. Well, all is not lost. We will run a large street out from here, and we'll just connect up elsewhere. Right, that should do it for now. How does that look? That looks all right. Now, whenever you're using a terminal like this, you're going to want to do something to make things logical as far as passengers crossing from one side of the city to the other, one side of the town. We say city because Sioux Falls will become a city in relatively short order. Not today, not for a little while, but it's definitely going to happen. And you've got a couple of options open to you. We could go over. Go on, you'll go over that. There you are. See, bridge straight over the top, and unlike the bridges one has boshed over the top of things in the past, were we to take this kind of approach, let's go stone, which looks dreadful. Wood does not look great either. There's really only one bridge that matters, but we are going to tinker around with many others. Yeah, so unlike previously where I've just whacked a bridge over the top and then kind of made it work, this time around what we'll do instead is we'll put a greater level of thought into each individual bridge, so that it matches with the aesthetic that we're going for. Right, let's get rid of some of this. I've had a thought. I've had a think about it. We'll get rid of some of this. There will be some speed builds, some time-lapsey type stuff in this series, but for the most part, I will build in real time, and then we'll all get to celebrate the glorious train views that come out of the other side of that. What I'm hoping here is that we can get a small street in, which we can, but it's not quite leaving enough space for the other thing that I want, which is the ability for houses to be built alongside it. which is less than perfect. Right, remove this big chunk here. I think I'll end up deleting all of that, you know. But you know, that's kind of why we do it. Is you know, you keep going till you get it right, or you don't do it at all. Right, lock in across there. Does that? It doesn't look straight. Lock in across here. Does that? I can tell already that's not straight. Look, we got a bend. No, I don't want a bend in my road. Let's go from about here, and then get this bit straight. And where I'm looking is the gap between here is staying relatively consistent. Because if we do that, we can then go out from here again in the opposite direction, and hopefully come up with something that is pretty straight all the way down. Now, I'm not going to grid every city because you know, that's not a healthy way to live life. But we will be employing grids to a certain degree. Let's do that, and then maybe you'll go across second time around. Construction is possible. I saw you do it. All right, maybe the construction's just not possible on this bit. All right, just no. I zoom out some. Right, do that because this bit very nicely snapped to the road. Good. Right, that's that one. And then if I can do this, but actually get across the road here, then we get the age-old friend of, have we created a lump in the track? Now, you should never put rail over the top of road. You should always go the other way round because it just works better. Now, we know that that will line up, so we'll do it that way. Having cars make a bit of a leap. Getting across a piece of track is one thing. Having trains do it, it's just a little bit less good somehow. Right, we'll continue to run this down here to... no, we won't. We won't reuse that one at all. We'll dump this, and then we'll dump the end sections of these. This yard is going to be rather smaller than I initially anticipated, but that's not the end of the world. There we go. Right, do that, and then we'll swoop this round onto the one that needs it the most, like so, and then we'll swoop all of these to connect en route. Right, if we make each one of them around a 35 mile per hour connection, and we are working in miles per hour for a little while, I will undoubtedly switch back in the future, but for now we'll stick with Imperial. Keep going. In fact, that's where we measure the point. Is we'll go for the area at which it's the closest connection that can be made, despite the fact that we don't actually need any more connections than the one to the depot itself, because that will handle just about everything. Go on, you'll get on there. That's it. There we go, and we got a nice little 4-track into one swoopy cross the road type connection there. Right, we'll pull those back out to match the area here, and then hopefully I've got... No, I've already measured this. I haven't got. There is not enough space for you to make your magical little kingdom there. We will come up with another scheme when we detail this section, I think. But that will do as a starting point. Leaves enough room for a build to occur there, and we can get all our trains out and into business, which is also quite nice. It's quite an abrupt bit of angle to get out and into the wild, but it's going to do nicely. Right, now then, let's get the road down the other side built. And again, I think we're going to end up eyeballing this, but the good news is we don't have to get any track through this one, so we'll use a slightly more liberal approach to the build. Let's go with medium, because slapping some stuff in alongside the station would be kind of cool. you're only going to connect there. Alright, well, then that's where we'll put you. Something like that. How do you feel? You feel pretty dreadful about life. Okay, well, never mind. That's better. It's not perfect. I can see that already, but it is better. Right, okay, now then, that gives us a starting point. Once the AI gets in, these lot will be rendered homeless, and we'll rebuild that section to kind of interface with everything else we've got going on. Now, the second town that we're going to head to in our initial push here is going to be El Paso. And on the way to El Paso, we're going to want additional stations, which hopefully will generate a few passengers as we crack on. So let's get, because this is for commuter services, and we'll do it. We'll get them relatively close to the originating town, because my thinking is if I can have an additional 1 to 2 stations outside each city in place of bus routes, then as the city grows, we end up with a nice healthy commuting service that we can plumb in as well. Now, your commuting stations aren't going to need to be anywhere near as big, and we can handle an upstream downstream without having to double track. But if we just run in a relatively straight line here up towards El Paso, then we've got our route set for sticking 1 to 2 additional commuter stations on here. In fact, we might pull out from this side rather like this. Just bend it off to the side a little, and we'll get a station in about there. Come on then, get your station in about there. All right, I'm doing it. Don't yell at me, man. We'll have the second street connection because we want it to build just about everywhere. We'll stick a minor amount of curvature on there so it points back towards where we need it to go. You will notice the double track has occurred already. And that's that's the benefit of pork barreling your way through your initial build phase, is that you can build what you aspire to later in the game early on, so you can appreciate it in action as it happens. And then we'll run that all the way to the station edge, like so. Not quite got the ballast merged there, but it's good enough. And then we're pointing in the right direction again. So the next piece of double track that we have here will run in a straight line up there. And hopefully once I've got all of these in, we'll have enough room to bridge over the top of this in a way that makes some sense. Now, I will be running elevated stations from time to time. I'll be running straight stuff. There's any number of different configurations that we're going to go for. But I plan on working them all. This one is not actually going to El Paso. This one is going up to Detroit, because we'll run this as the express route, and then number 3 will go to El Paso. In fact, what we'll do is we'll make this an in-out. So this one will branch out onto there, like that one. Yeah, you think? Yes, I do think. Right, and then from here we'll branch out onto there. Now we'll need some more junctioning. Once I start setting up routes along here, we'll apply a little bit of logic so that it actually does as intended, like so, a bit like that. Yeah, good. Right, and then we can remove this curve that we've got there, and fling it down there. So when it comes to route building, we're going to go slow and steady, but we will alternate between goods and passengers in order to keep things fresh, spicy, and interesting. We'll also then ensure over time that we represent other modes of transport to fully cover every aspect of the game. But that's going to wrap us up for today. I know, very little progress has been made, but this is the starting point from which glory will occur. We're not going to worry too much about making money because our gradual increasing pork barrel forest, which resides over here, will account for that. I'll build it some kind of nice compound eventually as well. Anyway, in the next episode, what we'll do is we'll complete this line from Sioux Falls to El Paso. So we'll repeat the process at El Paso with a nice beefy looking station, plenty of routes to go in and out, and hopefully this will allow us to get our first train running. Anyway, I've been Colonel Failure. Thank you very much for watching today. Fling a like at this one if you enjoyed the process, and if you like the looks of where this series may end up, and subscribe to make sure you don't miss the next part. I'll be back with you very soon. Thank you very much for watching. Cheerio!